the one in which Dean does not die. Welcome to Supernatural, a first watch podcast, a rewatch podcast designed to be spoiler-free and enjoyed as if it's your first watch. I'm your host, Kimberly, a self-proclaimed sci-fi and fantasy nerd. Previously on the road in Supernatural, we encountered a scarecrow that could come off its stand. And the boys had a fight, but quickly reunited and got back on the road together after getting directions from their father. So, in this episode, known as Faith, the big picture view is Dean is electrocuted and gets permanent damage to his heart, leaving him with only a couple months to live. Sam does not accept this and calls around to find a supernatural option, finding a preacher who claims to heal the incurable. They go and discover that the preacher is actually getting help from a reaper who is trading one life for another. So let's dive in deeper to Faith. So unlike most of our episodes so far, we don't open on a non-brotherly hunt. Instead, the brothers are hunting a rawhead, and they are clearly at the end of the hunt, but it breaks our normal format. Which indicates to me, of course, that something's about to change. After finding two children locked in a cupboard, the brothers go to lead them to safety, only to get attacked. Sam heads up with the kids while Dean stays to fight against the rawhead, and in the process manages to electrocute the rawhead with a taser, but because he's in a pool of standing water in a basement, he electrocutes himself as well. Now, again, I feel that Dean has been at the game quite a while. He knows not to do something like this, and I feel so far we have a great sense that he has a pretty good sense of spatial awareness, but because of plot, he ends up electrocuting himself, and Sam takes him to the hospital. While there, we realize that Sam is dealing with the cops and also dealing with insurance and continuing their scams, when he finds out that Dean had a massive heart attack and it severely damaged the heart, and he only has a few months to live. Now, while there is no conversation around why such a healthy young man would not be a candidate for heart transplant, I don't know. Maybe it's because they know they're not locals, but I do find it interesting that all we get is, hey, this guy's going to die. There are no other options. There are no other choices. And Sam goes to visit Dean in his hospital bed. Dean is rather resigned to what's going to happen. He looks horrible, but he's talking about the crap that is daytime television in a nice call out to how Jensen Ackles got his start on a daytime soap. Sam is not convinced that there are no other choices and wants to explore other options. Once again, Sam reaches out to their father and gets the answering machine, and it's his time to leave a heartfelt and emotional message, letting him know that Dean's been hurt, it's serious, and please could he come and help. While at the hotel, a knock at the door showcases that Dean has checked himself out AMA from the hospital, because he realizes that Sam is not going to let him wallow in his final month to live. And Sam's been working their contacts, so clearly they have a large number, and Sam has either been rebuilding his connections to the Hunter Network in the 6 or 7 months since they started hunting together, or he still remembers and they remember him from his time before he left to go to school. Either way, each of these people that he's called and talked with is willing to speak with him and share information, one of whom is Joshua, a friend of their father's in Nebraska, who talks about knowing a specialist. When they get there, of course, it's a tent in the middle of nowhere and in a lot of drizzle, which continues on for the entirety of the episode. Dean is incensed. He's not happy they're here, especially considering he realizes it's a faith healer, and he does not seem to have a lot of faith, especially in faith healers, whereas Sam rebuts that he feels it's time they have faith. Dean clearly doesn't believe, but he's being dragged around by his brother and dragged up to the front of the tent in order for the service. Before they head in, of course, there's another pretty girl to have a conversation with in which Dean does not land. And she asks why they're there if they don't have faith, and continues to share that this healer does actually heal people. It's a short but fun philosophical discussion in which Dean says he is willing maybe to have a little faith because of the pretty girl. But they head on into the tent for the beginning of the ceremony. It's very clear this tent is not only full, but it's full of very ill people. Dean, of course, is incredibly doubtful about the process and is mumbling under his breath to himself when the preacher opens the service and gets called out for it. But instead of being asked to leave, the pastor, Roy LaGrange, actually asks him to come on up to the front. So Dean goes up and tries to actually talk LaGrange out of even attempting to heal him. LaGrange is not having it and says that he was chosen, and puts his hands on Dean, and out of the corner of his eye before Dean collapses, he sees an emaciated old man in a suit standing behind LaGrange. Dun dun dun, here's another indicator that things are not right. Next, we head to the hospital to find out that they have sought the attention of a medical professional, and yeah, it looks like not only is Dean healed, but he doesn't even have indications of the damage the previous doctor had shared with him. Of course, the doctor shares that miracles do happen in both directions, and young people can both get cured and die for inexplicable reasons. When they ask her to elaborate, they find out that a 27-year-old man in perfect health recently collapsed from a heart attack just the day before. Of course, this pings on both of their radars, but Sam kind of wants to ignore it, whereas Dean wants to investigate. He says he has to make sense of what happened, that something isn't right about what's going on, and he's going to head on over to talk to the wife. While there, Dean has a conversation with the couple and finds out that LaGrange woke up one day blind, which showed him he had cancer. It was inoperable, and through the power of prayer, even though he fell into a coma, he did awaken and was cancer-free. He could no longer see still, but he could heal people. And he is very adamant that it was his calling from God to continue the healing process, and that he picked Dean because he saw he had a purpose and a future, that it wasn't his choice, but God's choice through him to choose Dean to get healed. Meanwhile, Sam is exploring what happened with the man who died and goes to the gym he was at and investigates by talking to a few people and finds out that the clocks froze at the exact moment that Dean was healed and the exact moment that Marshall died. No longer able to claim willful ignorance, Sam realizes that these two events are connected. While visiting the preacher and his wife, Dean once again runs into the pretty girl Layla and her mother. And while Layla is open and warm and open to conversation and genuinely happy that Dean was healed from his ailments, her mother is a different story, and even goes so far to ask as to why Dean deserves to be healed when her daughter doesn't. A little further investigation showcases that every time LaGrange has healed somebody, another person has died of exactly the same symptoms. However, they mention over the course of the last year, 6 healings have taken place, and over the course of this episode, 3 healings take place in the course of a few days. So it does beg the question, why so much time in between before, and why the escalation once they arrive? Or is it just that they did not find more victims, but there were? As he's doing this research, cut to a scene of LaGrange healing another person and a jogger in the woods, young and fit, being attacked by the same old man and dying. Dean realizes that the creature he saw must be a reaper, as it's the only creature they know of that has the power over life and death. And it explains why he saw something and Sam didn't, because the reaper only appears when they have essentially a mission to complete their goal and take somebody to death. In this discussion, Sam remembers the odd cross at the revival show and a clock that he recognizes from the death card of a tarot deck. Dean wants to kill the preacher outright, but Sam proposes instead that they just simply break the spell that has bound the reaper to the preacher. While Dean goes back to have a conversation with the preacher and try and distract them from being inside their house, Sam goes snooping. And in a really great bit of TV logic, he's looking around the study and notices a dust void in the bookcase and removing those books finds yet another book, but it's a little black book, which I find funny, behind the regular books, and of course realizes that they are the newspaper clippings of everyone who has died mysteriously because they were believed to be immoral. And of course, another newspaper clipping that he does recognize is the man standing in the parking lot handing out flyers about trying to shut down the faith healing tent, so they know who the next victim is. While Dean is in the crowd surveying and trying to do his best to prevent another healing, Layla has finally gotten her turn and she's called to the front. Dean tries to stop her, but he can't really explain why she shouldn't go to get healed, and fails to complete his mission. Failing to convince Layla, he instead sets a fire and causes the tent to be evacuated, and we see that the protester has been saved. He was running from the Reaper, but when the service was interrupted, the Reaper did not finish the job, which also shows, of course, that Layla was not healed. Dean realizes as the evacuation progresses that the preacher's wife is huddled in a corner, fervently whispering to herself, and he interrupts her, realizing she has a Coptic cross, and she is the one conducting the switch, not her husband. The cops who are hanging around because of the protesters arrest Dean, but Sue-Ann claims she's not going to press charges because she gave him life, but she can also take it away. Because Layla has been there for so long and the healing was interrupted, LaGrange promises a private session that night and that he will heal Layla. It's very clear that the good pastor is not aware of what's going on and feels that he really can heal people, and does not know that in order to heal one person, he's actually taking the life of another. They discover that in order to save her husband, the wife has actually bound the Reaper with some seriously dark magic and is now using it to give it its own kills. In order to free the Reaper and stop the killings, they must destroy the cross or the altar. Otherwise, the killings will continue. It's very interesting to note that Sam has completely changed his tune now. Obviously, before he was desperate to find a cure for Dean and did not think of the consequences, but he is readily able to judge Sue-Ann for desperately finding a solution for her husband. Dean is conflicted because he does feel Layla deserves to be healed, but Sam points out they can't play God. And Dean draws off the police while Sam breaks into the basement to try and find the shrine. Of course, just as she promised, Sue-Ann has decided that the next one to die should be Dean because she gave him life and she can take it away. And Sue-Ann interrupts him and locks him in the cellar, stating that Dean is one of the wicked, so he must be killed. While Dean once again faces off against the Reaper, and he starts to lose color and his eyes turn milky, Sam successfully stops and interrupts the ritual. Once again, Layla does not get healed because the Reaper has been freed, and it immediately attacks Sue-Ann because, of course, she has been controlling the Reaper. Sam and Dean return to their hotel, and Dean is still conflicted, wondering if they actually did the right thing. Layla visits and absolves Dean and says that even though she wasn't healed, she still believes that miracles can happen. And Dean, in a reversal of what he's been sharing so far, says he's not much of the praying type, but he'll pray for you. And she says, well, there you go. Miracles really do happen. And instead of the brothers driving off into the sunset, we end the episode here. There is no true local legend in this episode. However, there are miracle healings that have actually made the paper. And Sam does call around to contacts within their network to find the place to go in the first place. And I find it interesting to note that the hunter sent him to a specialist, but did not do his own investigation, as it is very clear within just a few days of them being there that there is some sort of link. And while the preacher may seem to be healing people, he's also killing people. And that introduces a really great gray moral line, which we'll talk about in just a minute, for, when do humans become something for hunters to hunt? Or do they ever become something hunters can hunt? Once again, they are themselves this week as they are desperately searching for a cure for Dean and giving a very interesting interpretation of just driving by a house to rescue the children when Sam is talking to the cops at the beginning of the episode. The two creatures we see is a rawhead, which we've heard mentioned before, and a reaper. Very interesting to note that he calls it a reaper, not the Grim Reaper, and I would love to know why Dean knows the difference. How do you kill a reaper? Well, Dean exclaims that they can't kill death, but apparently they can free a bound reaper by destroying the altar that is behind the black magic that has bound it to the spellcaster. Of course, by doing so, they do end up killing the spellcaster, but not by their own hand. You've seen them before. Most of us who are at all involved in the supernatural or fantasy realm will recognize Julie Benz, the lovely and young Layla, as Darla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel, along with various stints on sci-fi television shows and cop shows like Dexter and Hawaii Five-0. This is also the second alumni we have seen so far from the Buffyverse, including Amy Acker in the third episode, Dead in the Water. So I really love this episode for a number of reasons, and there's so much to unpack here. And so we've got a new section here called The Grays of Hunting. And a lot of pieces of this episode just build such a deep and nuanced look at where is good, where is evil, and where do you draw the line. Sam is desperate to save his brother and is open to exploring supernatural means, whereas so far we have seen pretty much the hunter credo, if you will, is that if it's supernatural, it's bad. It's not a good thing. And they talk about and have the perspective so far that anything that is supernatural, of course, must be bad. It must be evil. But Sam pretty quickly jumps to, well, maybe there's a supernatural way to cure my brother. And he does not think about the consequences. For many of us who have seen anything in the world of magic, as depicted by any number of television shows, but also if you've ever read anything about Wicca or what people consider magic today, there's always a law of return, or the power of three. The idea is, of course, that for everything you ask for, there is a consequence, either good or bad. So the idea that Sam, who's grown up in this world, does not think that there's a downside to Dean miraculously being healed, I find very interesting. Or maybe he's just got very narrow vision and hasn't thought about it too much. Once Dean is healed, and then they find out very quickly, of course, that somebody died in his stead, I find that Sam's reaction is very interesting as well, because he seems to want to try and ignore it. Clearly, he is faced with something he did cause the death of another human being, and he seems a little upset, but not that upset, because his brother is still alive. Dean, however, is completely horrified. He has been in this world and did not take the break that Sam did, and is resigned to his fate when he finds out that his hunting life has caused damage to his heart. The only reason he breaks out of the hospital and goes with Sam is because he's realizing that Sam is looking for another option, and he doesn't want him to get into anything dangerous without any sort of backup. Even though he can barely stand up, much provide really great backup to his brother at this point. So the gray line becomes, where do hunters step in? Dean and Sam even have a really great philosophical question around the morality of killing the preacher. Dean believes they should kill the preacher because he's playing God and trading one life for another. And not only trading one life for another, but he's not even doing it randomly. As they do their investigation, they realize that each of the victims that dies in somebody else's stead is a chosen victim. In some way, shape, or form, they have chosen people they believe are immoral to take the place of somebody who's praying in their tent. So the question becomes, where is that line? And because this person has bound a reaper, but is not doing the actual killing, are they responsible? Because they are saving lives, but they're also taking lives in the process. Of course, in this instance, we don't have to find out what they might do if actually faced with needing to kill somebody, because there is another choice, which is simply to end the spell. Of course, ending the spell, while it does kill the perpetrator, and they say as well in dialogue that they expect the preacher to die shortly thereafter, I'm not entirely sure why. Obviously, one life has already been exchanged for the preacher's, whoever his wife chose to die in her husband's stead. So the Reaper has already taken that soul, and the other one should live in exchange, especially since Dean is not worried about losing his life, even though they've ended the spell. So one has to assume that those who already had their lives exchanged should not fear the Reaper. So I'm curious to know, because the preacher was clearly unaware of what was going on, why the brothers think the preacher will die as well shortly thereafter, after his wife does. Of course, understanding that the wife dies because she bound the Reaper, that also brings into question, does the Reaper operate by strict rules of conduct? Does the Reaper have permission to take her life instead of somebody else's when they're no longer bound? Or is it because the Reaper was bound that the wife's life is forfeit because she already broke the rules of how death operates? All really great questions, I find. And the Grays of Hunting, I do believe we'll probably see some more. I think it would be really interesting because is anything black and white? Can we truly believe things are black and white? So far, what we have seen is most creatures who are simply murdering. However, in the case, for example, of the episode of Dead in the Water, the children were being murdered, but it was from a child that was murdered by his friends. And then, of course, in the case of Bloody Mary, one of the would-be victims I even brought up earlier, I wondered if she could truly be considered responsible for her boyfriend's suicide when she was not in any way, shape, or form the one who helped pull the trigger or caused a bad relationship. He was just probably a very depressed person. So in the Grays of Hunting, we'll explore where does that line lie and what kind of implications might be there. Dean is also very, very negative about any sort of faith-based practices, it seems. Not only does he say, "You brought me to a faith healer," but the very idea of having faith is a little bit surprising to him. Also, of course, we'll dive into Dean's self-worth here as well, because he doesn't believe he deserves to be healed. Even though he has phrased it himself as the family business is saving people, he doesn't believe he deserves to be saved, which I find very interesting, to the point where even though he has followed along to the faith tent because his brother took him there and understands that his brother is going to exhaust all avenues to find a cure for him, he even tries to talk the preacher out of healing him, even though just moments before he made a comment about the fact that the only reason the faith healer chooses somebody is because of their ability to pay him. So again, a doctor has an ability to heal people and gets paid for it, and can't always heal people because they can't afford it. So where does that line lie as well with a faith healer? If they can heal somebody and don't have a Reaper bound to them, where's the morality of gathering money for it? All really great questions to contemplate for the Grays of Hunting. Also, we see it throughout this episode, Sam's attitude towards what's going on as well completely change. When he finds out his brother's diagnosis, he's adamant that he's going to find him a cure and starts exploring the various supernatural options. And when Dean is healed, he just says, "Hey, let's let it go. Let's let it go." Of course, nothing bad happened, and of course, Dean is not willing to do so, so Sam reluctantly follows along on the investigation. And then when he's confronted by the wife, he says something along the lines of, "You don't have the right to play God." And yet Sam sought out an option that gave someone the right to play God, essentially. Of course, Sam did not go as far as deciding to murder people who don't agree with what he agrees with, but he very much judges the wife for her even finding the solution in the first place of binding a Reaper so that her husband doesn't die. And then, of course, where is the line in that case? If you simply bind the Reaper so that your own husband doesn't die, but you don't continue to use that ability to take the lives of others that you believe are less worthy, where is the line on that? Is it gray? Is it not? Really great questions for contemplation. So in the family business, we get some really great development here between Sam and Dean once again. Obviously, Dean is given a month to live. Sam says, "Nope, I'm not going to accept that." And Dean wants to. Dean is clearly, especially in the hospital bed, resigned to his fate, but takes it as his due. He realizes and expects that he will die while hunting, and that it's not a surprise. And while, of course, he doesn't want to die, he's also not incredibly gung-ho about looking for a solution, whereas Sam is the complete opposite. And we have to remember it's only been about 6 or 7 months, I believe, at this point, maybe a little longer, that they've been hunting together, and they had not spoken for years before they started hunting together. So now Sam is 100% in on keeping his brother with him and keeping him with him for the purposes of hunting. There is no discussion of them giving up their hunting ways once Dean has been injured, and once he's back to full health. They fully intend to continue on with their work, or at least there is no discussion that we see where they talk about maybe getting out of the life. And Sam himself does not bring it up, even though just a few episodes ago, actually just to the previous episode, he was complaining about the fact that his family expected him to live a certain way, which included being a part of the hunting lifestyle. So it's a complete 180 when his brother's health is in danger, which I find really great character development. And they continue to watch each other's back and operate pretty seamlessly now as a hunting duo. And once again, the brothers do reach out when things get super serious to their father and hear nothing back. And this is where I want to bring out that A+ parenting tag again, because we hear nothing, absolutely nothing from their father. Does he even acknowledge that he heard his son is going to die? Does he know what his other son is about to do in the search to stop his brother from dying? I would think as a hunter himself and knowing about the world in general, that he might want to reach out and speak with his son and encourage him not to go to the faith healer, for example, although it is very clear that a friend of their father's is the one who sends them to the faith healer in the first place. So my other wonder, of course, is I don't remember if that conversation took place before or after Sam called him, because if it was after Sam called their father, did their father give the information and pass it on through a friend to make sure that their boys had an option? But we do not see him reach out in any way, shape, or form, even though he has essentially been informed that his son's about to die. Another great question to contemplate is that even though the ritual was not completed and it's heavily implied that Layla is still sick, the Reaper did get his hands on Dean, and he started to lose color and his eyes started to turn milky. So even though the ritual was not completed, I am intrigued to know, did Dean get years taken off of his life? And because he was touched by a Reaper, even though he was supposed to be touched by a Reaper within a month, one would assume, since he had been given a month diagnosis to live by the doctors, was that simply him taking a part of what the Reaper was owed? And of course, because his life was already exchanged by the Reaper, another great question to contemplate is that why it took longer? Right? Because we see most of the others die pretty quickly. Dean does not. Just enough time to stop the ritual and break the binding. But also, of course, noting that the Reaper does just walk away, even though he had started the process of, we assume, taking Dean's life. Overall, this is, I think, a fantastic episode and a lot more what I would have expected from the first episode back from the hiatus. Ironically enough, this is also the episode in which I stopped watching when it was initially on the air. I began watching this episode and found out that there were heavy rumors that Supernatural was about to be canceled. And decided that since I was behind, it was nearing the end of the season when I actually watched this episode on my DVR, and I decided, okay, well, I saw Dean get the diagnosis. I was like, okay, I assume then things are going to change. I'm going to stop watching here, because I had also heard that the show was not going to get renewed. Of course, the WB and UPN soon after combined forces and became the new CW. So they actually kept the programming because they needed programming for the brand new merger. And because they had at least somewhat of a following, they kept Supernatural. So this is actually the episode I stopped watching, but I think this is one of the strongest episodes so far that we have seen. It's a really great story. It doesn't have a ton of tropes, right? We skipped over the trope-tastic section because there aren't a lot of even imagery that we see in this episode that kind of evokes that feeling of a horror film. And it's a very different story, right? The few times I have seen a Reaper portrayed in television or movies, it's a very different feel. And this one is very much that it's a man just doing a job, right? It's an old man in a suit. He's there to take what he needs to take. He's there to do what he needs to do. And the idea behind, and in dialogue, we hear that priests in the early years of Christianity were still using magic, of course, referring back to the idea that a lot of pagan communities were encouraged to convert to Christianity by converting their priests and holy spaces first. I just do find it incredibly fascinating, and it brings a lot of nuance and richness to the world of supernatural. Of course, also the idea that Dean was meant to die, right? We're 6-7 months into this first run, and Dean almost dies, and he comes back, but he comes back in a way that makes sense in the narrative, and that has consequences. Oftentimes, when we see some sort of storyline where a person's almost going to die and then a miracle happens, there's usually no downside. But here there is a downside. It's immediate. And Dean is actually horrified and did not want it to happen. So I find it really fascinating, this break between the brothers' perspective. Dean doesn't want to explore supernatural options. And I think part of the reason why Dean is resigned to his fate is because he thinks that if they pursue a supernatural option, there's going to be a downside. And he's proven correct. So in this episode, we get Sam, who's desperate to save his brother, willing to try anything, reaches out to the contacts, which also shows to us that Sam is now heavily involved in the hunting world. Even though he claimed even just an episode ago that he wants to break with what they're doing, stop going on hunts, and simply find their father to start getting answers, he's in the world, he's involved in the world, he knows how to work the angles, and he's all in. Obviously, they saved 2 children at the beginning of this episode, and Dean would probably, I feel at this point in time, say it's worth it, right? It was worth his life to save 2 small children from the fate, whatever it would have been, at the hands of a rawhead. But Sam, of course, does not agree. So I think it's a great deep dive into the gray area of hunting and that question between good and evil, and when does it simply become a creature doing what they need and a creature making a choice, right? So in the instance of the Reaper, it's doing its job, right? Its job is to collect the souls of the dead, I would assume. And it was being coerced to take the souls of people who weren't due, right? Who hadn't hit their date yet, is my assumption. But as soon as the spell breaks, it doesn't continue to take Dean's life. It walks away. And in fact, as soon as the spell is interrupted, in the initial healing scene that we were going to have with Layla, it walks away. Even though it was actively pursuing and attacking another person, as soon as the prayer stopped, it stopped. Which showcases that it was only doing something because it was compelled, and that it just introduces so many nuances and so many layers into this world. Also, of course, the continuing saga of Daddy Knows Best, but Daddy is not that great, because now we've had an instance where they've had to go back to their childhood home. The kids are completely freaked out. And now we have an instance of Dean almost dying and hearing nothing from their father. So they want to find him, but my question is, what is the impetus behind wanting to find him, and what thoughts are going through their head around this idea that they need to find him? Because clearly they're used to relying on him. They're used to being able to get in touch with their father. But I also wonder if they could get in touch with their father when they were growing up. Just because while there's no mention of the fact that they left the message when they were at the house and didn't hear back, of course, and then as soon as they got orders, Dean is ready to go, right? In our previous episode, we saw that Dean got orders and he's like, yep, okay, I'm ready to keep moving. And Sam did not like that. But here we see Sam near breakdown and reaching out to his father and saying, hey, please get in touch. It's bad. And we never see him reach out. So it's a very interesting peek into the family dynamics, which I look forward to seeing more of. So questions to contemplate. First, of course, this is a fantastic episode, and I'm really excited to see what comes up next. And overall, I think this should be one of the highest rated shows in the first season, simply because it introduces so many potential storylines. We get a break from just some sort of creature of the week feature here. Rawhead is there very briefly, but we don't even go into the lore of it because it's not what's important. What's important is the story between the brothers and looking for a cure for Dean, and how, in a lot of ways, curing one person causes the death of another. Even if we look at just modern medicine nowadays, right? Oftentimes, if we're getting certain types of transplants like lungs or hearts, that means somebody else died. Now, granted, those are usually people in the real medical industry, right? If you're not buying it on the black market, but in the regular registry of organ donors, if you're on the registry to get a heart or to get a set of lungs, that means somebody died to give them to you. So that balance of, life continuing on after life and where is that line? It's just a really great contemplation, I think, for all of us. So questions to contemplate as we wrap up the episode of Faith. Did Dean lose part of his life force? Does this mean that he has less years in the bank than he thought? Or was it a continuation? Because based off of what the doctor shared, he should have only had a month left to live. So did he get 2 months and only lost a little bit of time? I would love to see if there is any sort of consequences of him having an exchange with a Reaper, and any sort of consequences of the Reaper starting the process to retake his life. Another question to contemplate is, did their father send them to the Faith Healer via a proxy, or did their father just not know it all and not ever reach out? Really great question. What happens with Layla, right? Does Dean actually pray, and does she get her miracle? Will we hear from her again? Will we see her again? I would love to know what happened with the other people who were part of the Faith Healing. Are there any negative consequences of having their lives exchanged for another with a bound Reaper, and will that have consequences in the future for them? I would love to know that. I would also love to know where they're headed next. And is Sam now 100% into the hunting life? Is Sam still contemplating going back to his life because he's seen that his brother could die at any time, and now he's really into using the supernatural in a way that will benefit him? So what kind of path will that take him down? All really great questions to contemplate, and I look forward to seeing what happens next. So our final death count in this episode, on screen at least, we see the man who died at the pool. We see the female jogger, and we also see Sue Ann die on screen as well. So up next, I will see you on the road in Route 666. You're listening to Supernatural First Watch Podcast. Don't miss out on future episodes. Subscribe to the show in your podcast player of choice. Got opinions, theories, or comments you want to share about the road so far? Send in your thoughts at the email in the show notes.